the Jets are reaching a new low, and it's just laughable because we say all the time on the show, one thing that's going to kill a great defense. And 2 weeks ago, the Jets were ranked as the #1 total defense on Pro Football Focus. And now they are 4-7. The idea of Aaron Rodgers coming back was keeping hope alive, but now you're definitely not going to make the playoffs, especially in the AFC. And the team has fallen so far behind that it's like you knew what Zach Wilson was coming into the year. And then you thought Aaron Rodgers could fix him, but he was struggling to score in September and October. And if he's going to be struggling to score in those, what's he going to do in the later months of the year when it's colder? He's playing outside in New York, and he's going to put up 13 points against the Miami Dolphins. And it's not like you can't go up against the Miami Dolphins and get yards. And then you thought Aaron Rodgers was going to be the savior for this team. Well, what did Aaron Rodgers bring to the New York Jets? He brought over Nathaniel Hackett, currently the worst offensive coordinator in the NFL. He brought over Adam Lazard, and now a healthy scratch for most games.
And a horrible contract, too.
4
years, $40 million. They're going to be paying him $12 million the next 3 years.
Yeah, $12 million over the next 3 years. And then he brought over Billy Turner, Billy Turner, who's been a turnstile on the offensive line. And then he brought over Randall Cobb, 3 catches, 12 targets for 20 yards. Great. And then he brought Tim Boyle, statistically one of the worst QBs in college and professional football history. And then he also brought over Dalvin Cook, who's averaging 3 yards per carries and has no touchdowns.
So Aaron Rodgers has cursed the Jets, basically. And we were critical of him when we were going into the offseason. We're like, he's going out and signing Randall Cobb, Adam Lazard, freaking Dalvin Cook, who a lot of people we saw he kind of lost a little bit of his burst last year. Still played some good football, but now at this point, like everything that the Jets are facing right now is their fault because Aaron Rodgers went down week 1. You hated to see it. It was a tragedy what happened. And, I don't think the Jets deserve it at that point. But I understand, having Zach Wilson step in for a few weeks. But as soon as you saw a sample size of 4 or 5 games and you saw how bad he was playing, why didn't you go after Carson Wentz? Why didn't you trade for Josh Dobbs? Why did you move forward with Tim Boyle, who had 2 touchdowns in college? And I don't usually like to discriminate against, bad quarterbacks. I'm not here to rip on them. Zach Wilson, I know he's a human at the end of the day, but Tim Boyle is the face of why is it him and not blank, right? Like for the last 7 years or so, it's been like, why does Colin Kaepernick not have a job? Why does RG3 not have a job? Why does Cam Newton not have a job? For a while we were saying, why does Carson Wentz not have a job?
Yeah.
And now he's with the Rams. But you see someone like Tim Boyle, who had 2 touchdowns in college, undrafted, comes in. He's played for, I think, 4 teams, played for the Lions, played for the Packers. Now he plays for the Jets. And I'm not here to hate on the man that is Tim Boyle, but the player that is Tim Boyle, how does he keep getting opportunities? Because he was horrible against the Dolphins. And the Dolphins, their defense is not spectacular. They've underperformed pretty severely, I would say. And I'm like, there's better options in free agency at this point than Tim Boyle. At this point, they're just killing whatever momentum they did have at that point. And it all comes back down to the Jets, the same team that drafted Christian Hackenberg, the same team that drafted Bryce Petty, the same team, Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson. The list goes on with them. And this is the grave that they built for themselves. And they deserve all of it.
Yeah, and I have a theory with all of this Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to make the fastest comeback in history, and if he doesn't do it, my theory with it is Aaron Rodgers has this ability to stay relevant, stay in the news. He always needs to be the center of attention. Even when he's not playing on the football field, he's going to find a way for himself to be talked about. So Aaron Rodgers and this whole, I'm going to come back this season, I'm going to lead you to the playoffs this year. Well, you're out of the playoffs so far right now, and you're definitely not going to make it, especially in the AFC, even if Aaron Rodgers does come back and run the table. But for me, even though he is back in practice and throwing passes, like he always had this, maybe I'll leave the Packers this year, maybe not. And then we had to go through that drama for 3 years in Green Bay. Then he had to make it all about himself. So he has this ability, and it is a great ability, and I'm not criticizing him for it, but he just has this ability to stay relevant, stay stay in the news, and this whole fact that I'm going to come back in the fastest in history and it would be remarkable to see. I'm not saying it isn't, but it feels more like Aaron Rodgers trying to stay relevant, trying to stay in the media, trying to stay in the media's talking points so far this season. And it just seems like an attention grab so far. Like, oh, is Aaron Rodgers going to come back? And then he's creating headlines, and the guy is great at it. And it's not a criticism, but at the same time, you can easily look at it and be like, I know why we're having this conversation, and especially for the New York Jets. And this is a team that's like, you signed Brett Favre. You made the exact same mistake. And then you're signing 15 years ago. And now you're signing Aaron Rodgers again. It's the same exact mistake. And the way you're going to kill and waste the best defense ranked by Pro Football Focus and Robert Saleh, who I think is a really good head coach and hasn't got a fair shake just with how unlucky they have been at the quarterback position. You had Sam Darnold, absolute bust. It was propaganda by Colin Cowherd and Fox Sports to put him as a top pick. And I think that was all propaganda for Sam Darnold. And then you have Zach Wilson, the most NFL ready quarterback. Anytime someone says most NFL ready quarterback,
Bust.
It means immediate bust. Josh Rosen, Zach Wilson,
Sam
Darnold coming out of it. They're like, yeah, this guy's going to be ready to go. Kenny Pickett spent 4 years in college. Like, well, maybe he spent 4 years in college for a reason. And because he wasn't ready to go into the NFL because Trevor Lawrence came out of college early. He was a young quarterback. Lamar Jackson. The only one it really worked with was Joe Burrow when he spent all of that time in college just because he had to go to Ohio, then LSU, bounced around a little bit. But this whole thing with the Jets, it's like you shouldn't have got Aaron Rodgers to begin with, not because Aaron Rodgers isn't a Hall of Fame talent, but because he's underachieved in Green Bay in the playoffs last year. And the past few years in Green Bay, they've had a Super Bowl quality team, but they've just underperformed in the playoffs. And then you think that's going to be different in the AFC, which has a more stacked conference, has tougher competition, where in the NFC, it's really just the Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers. But no, you lost to Jimmy G at home and you only put up 10 points. And that's your fix for the future? No. What all you did was destroy the morale of that team. You thought you could fix Zach Wilson, and now you have Nathaniel Hackett. You're paying Adam Lazard too much money. You have Randall Cobb. Now you have Dalvin Cook on that team. It's like, it didn't fix your team. All it did is, as soon as Aaron Rodgers leaves, you still don't know how to draft a quarterback. And what are you going to do? Bring a quarterback in free agency?
Well, we've seen with the Colts, we've seen with the Jets at this point, and there's plenty of other examples, the Panthers even, teams that seem to think that they have just one last hole to fix, and it's always the quarterback position. And it's because we saw what happened with Matt Stafford and Tom Brady, where everyone seems to think that they're just one quarterback away. But the Jets should have known that it wasn't just Zach Wilson. Yes, they have this great defense, but they also don't have an offensive line, and they also don't have a dynamic number 2 wide receiver. You somewhat had it last year with Elijah Moore, but you traded him because he demanded to be traded.
Yeah.
And then now it's like, even when he comes back, like, it's going to be Garrett Wilson and who else at that point? Because Tyler Conklin, he's a fine tight end. I'd say he's in the Hayden Hurst conversation. And then other than that, it's like, who's your other receivers? Adam Lazard, healthy scratch, terrible contract, one of the worst in the NFL now. And then Randall Cobb, you literally took him out of retirement to play with you at this point. The Jets, don't be like the Colts when they had Carson Wentz, Phillip Rivers, Jacoby Brissett. You're not one piece away. You have plenty of old holes to fix. And that team, they had the Frank Reich era, which we'll talk about Frank Reich soon enough. But you're not one fix away. And every team that does this, it usually fails. The Rams, they had Matt Stafford. They traded for Matt Stafford. They had Jared Goff. They made a Super Bowl. They had Aaron Donald. They had Von Miller that they traded for. They had weapons. They were good. They were one piece away. They made the NFC title game multiple times.
Good Cooper Kupp and OBJ.
Yeah. And then the Bucks, you look around them. They were 7-9 when a guy threw 30 interceptions, and they still nearly made the playoffs with him. Okay, that makes sense. You also brought in, I don't know, the greatest quarterback of all time, arguably one of the greatest athletes of all time as well. Maybe a little bit different than Aaron Rodgers, and going to the Jets, who have the worst winning percentage of the last 15 years. The only team that hasn't made the playoffs since 2010. By the way, for context, 2010, I was 12 years old, and you were 11, 9, something like that.
2010. Yeah, I wasn't 10 until November. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have not seen the Jets be a playoff team since Mark Sanchez, and I was a 10-year-old at that point, 12-year-old at that point.
That was the last time Aaron Rodgers made a Super Bowl, mind you. That was Pittsburgh versus Green Bay that year, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the world has changed a little bit. New president, social media, whatever else you want to include. The world was a lot different since the
Three
Jets.
new presidents.
3 new presidents, soon to be 4. And it's like the Jets, they're going to be the new Colts because Aaron Rodgers, he might even retire after this year because it's Aaron Rodgers. He's going to at least float it around. And then when he leaves, they're going to be like, all right, let's go out and get Geno Smith. Let's go out and get Ryan Tannehill. Let's go out and get Mac Jones. You know, that's what they're going to do the next 4 years because they're one piece away. And then you're going to see Sauce Gardner leave. You're going to see DJ Reed leave. You're going to see Quinnen Williams leave. And that defense will not be good. And they're going to ruin what is a pretty fantastic defense.